So, welcome back to 3rd Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another custom settlement that was made by WK. And again, it's a custom settlement made by WK which is in rather dreary conditions. We're making a return to the Grey Havens today, a real popular settlement of his. And it may be dreary because the elves have left us, although there is a theme to be had here. The elves have retreated west, and there is now a bit of a civil war going on between the Numenorians, and it would appear that Numenor themselves are going to be holding on to the Grey Havens with their last remaining Numenorian vassal in Cardolan. 2 Cardolan armies are going to be joining them on the defence today, and Umbar, the black Numenorians, the evil half of them, so we'll put it that way, that the good Numenorians are on the defence and the corrupted Numenorians are on the attack. A few Umbar armies and also their conquered brethren from the south, which they have already managed to subjugate in Gondor, and Amroth are going to be marching alongside them today to try and wrest control of this settlement away from the Numenorians. So it's going to be an interesting one. There's plenty of quality, plenty of different strengths as well, although they can all trace their lineage back to the same source, at least for the most part. Cardolan, of course, with a bit of middlemen blood in them, and Amroth with a bit of elven heritage as well. They all have very different strengths in spite of this common ancestry. So, we'll go through the attackers first and foremost, as we usually do, those who are filling the role of evil today. And I do believe it is going to be 3 Umbar armies. We shall start off with Ruvik096. I do hope that he has a good performance in this battle, because I imagine he probably, based on the fact that I'm recording ahead of time, I can't confirm this, but I imagine he's probably gotten a little bit of stick after the last battle replay where his decision to retreat some crossbows from a fight ultimately wound up in his team losing that one. So we shall see. He is on the attack once again, and this time he is playing as a much more high quality force in Umbar. Got some upgraded Balakith axe guards, so a little bit tankier than they would otherwise be, and that armour piercing is going to be universally useful in this kind of battle. Armour piercing against any Numenorian faction is going to be useful because they are all somewhat reliant on their armour, and especially for equalising the fight against some of the better Numenor units in particular. This could be exactly the sort of unit which is very, very handy. Umbar in general, of course, are going to be able to stand up to Numenor's martial might just across the board anyway, and the Alcarondas Legion are one way they can do that. A fantastic unit of line infantry, among the best standard line infantry that the humans can field. Alongside Numenor, you would say this is where the humans peak, really, in terms of their massable units of line infantry. Excuse me. And the Gondorians go about things in a different manner, which we'll get onto in just a moment. Several units of upgraded Corsair infantry. You're going to have to cut some corners somewhere in the Umbar army because so much of it is expensive and it is a 5v3. So you're going to have some cheaper units. The Corsair infantry with an armour upgrade is a decent choice though, because they're light line infantry and melee, not too special there, but numerous at the very least. But what really sets them apart is the fact they do have a few volleys of basic arrows in them, so they're quite a multifaceted unit, and they will be useful for that reason. Wearing the enemy down is a very valid tactic in a 5v3, and this is an ideal unit to be your opening gambit if that is going to be how you go about things, especially when you consider all of the other heavy armoured units that Umbar have available to them. More Alcarondas Legion here. Ruvik's general is going to be, unsurprisingly, in a unit of Harbingers of Castamere. When it comes to heavy swordsmen, they are outperformed not only by Numenor who are against them, but also Amroth have got a better heavy swordsman than this, but outside of that, they're still a very impressive unit, even if they aren't the best of their kind on the field today. They're a very fantastic looking unit as well. They look suitably menacing and yet regal, which is exactly what you'd expect from the highest echelon of black Numenorians. Corsair crossbowmen. Crossbows are the sort of thing the defenders will have the advantage in today, for the most part anyway. The Corsair crossbowmen, while they can equal the defending crossbows for damage, certainly, they are much more fragile and they will have to put themselves in harm's way to be useful, but perhaps if they bide their time they can be committed at a time in the battle when ammunition is running low. We shall see. We've also got some Balakith marksmen, another fantastic choice if you're going to take the slow burn approach with Umbar. Really good at trading back and forth with enemy archers. It's an area where Numenor actually lack a little bit as well, because their heavier archer is of course an armour piercing one with much less ammunition, so they can't really go for that slower approach like Umbar can. There's also the mighty Castamere's Rangers just in behind them. Body piercing is the sort of thing we will be waving goodbye to, at least with foot rangers in the very near future. So this is perhaps going to be one of the last larger scale sieges that we actually see this kind of mechanic used in. We shall see. And finally some Corsair Blackguards as well. Javelins are always going to be useful, and they also make decent makeshift line infantry when all is said and done. Now moving on to the second attacking army, we have the Gondorian representation today, played by Runosko. He's got several units of standard Gondor spearmen without the armour upgrade. This is perhaps an example, once again, of having lower funds, but Gondor, of course, what does separate them from their Numenorian brethren is the fact that spears and polearms, this is their focus, and they are better at it than any other army on the field today. The basic Gondor spearmen are nothing to write home about, really, but you can mass them up decently enough, and that can be a decent defensive line as well. So we shall see how well they do. A couple of units of Gondor archers as well, again without the armour upgrade. It is a little bit strange to see no armour upgrades for Gondor, considering the fact that they are very cheap for Gondor to invest in these armour upgrades, and it does make a significant difference with how tanky they can be, which in a siege can be very, very important indeed. But we'll see. The Gondor archers should still be able to trade reasonably well with most of the defending archers. I've actually got an example of the old model for the Gondor infantry here, which is kind of an interesting thing to see. You can see the longer tabards of the archers and the spearmen in front. This is what the standard Gondor infantry used to look like, with sort of shorter coats, but they are of course the catapult crew. Always useful to bring a catapult on the Grey Havens. While there's only a few walls to actually knock down, widening those choke points is really, really effective, as we've seen not only on the Grey Havens but on other siege battles as well. Wardens of the White Tower, something else Gondor of course do quite well is their shielded units. The Wardens of the White Tower are the best of their standard line infantry in that regard. Couple of units of Citadel Guard, which of course add armour piercing. This is a really standout unit for the Gondorians, and will be something that both Cardolan and Numenor will not like dealing with on the defence. We shall see how they do. Pelagia Marines, pretty similar in many ways at range to the Corsair Blackguards. The Blackguards in general are just a little bit better of a unit all around, but they will be filling much the same role as the Umbar version. We do have a mounted unit, the Mithrandir's Retinue, probably going to be more useful as a defensive tool, which is weird because they are multiple HP Lancers. I would have thought one of the Umbar armies would have been a better choice for bringing cavalry. Certainly Dol Amroth. Gondor, probably least of all of the attackers, should be investing too heavily in cav, but here we are, and it is also where the general's going to be hanging out, so if he does have to intercept cavalry, hopefully it doesn't get too ugly for it. Nimlothian Honor Guard, the best Gondorian general in my opinion, again leaning into that armour-piercing spear focus that they tend to have, and a couple of units of Ravenhelms. It feels like it's been quite a while since we've actually seen the Ravenhelms of Caer Andros, but another really nice unit of heavy swordsmen. Interesting to see no Fountain Guard, but an unshielded, expensive unit like that could be more of a liability if they're focused down after all. Then we have Beastie70, who is the player who sent me this battle replay, so big thank you to him. Go through his army slightly quicker, because we've already seen an Umbar force after all. Alcarondas Legion pushing up the round. Need to be careful of the Gondorian catapult to make sure you don't get friendly fire. Balakith Marksman once again for that heavy skirmishing unit. Invested a little bit more in his more heavily armoured Ardenaim units. Ardenaim Shield Guarders, standard spears, very, very tough to bring down. Not necessarily as quick at dealing damage as some of the non-spear units they have, but they will keep fighting for a very, very long time. And the Black Numenorian units, of course, locked morale, which is always nice. It means your attack isn't as likely to fall apart. Naruna Iroh Guard, more Ardenaim Shield Guard, a really strong unit of heavily armoured archers this. The spears make them difficult for cavalry to tangle with as well, so a very good all-round pick. Corsair Fencers, the Umbar Assassins, pretty fragile but very damaging if they can get into the right position. Assassin units are a weird one. They can be very useful, but they are also simultaneously quite fragile for their cost. It's a strange one. It's something which perhaps deserves a little bit more of a look, but something we can't do right at this very moment. Alcarondas Legion, we've got some upgraded Balakith Shield Bearers. Once again, armour piercing, like I said, is going to be universally useful, so I can certainly see why some upgraded Shield Bearers have been brought, but do bear in mind that they're not going to be quite as effective all round as the Alcarondas Legion. They're more of a specialist line infantry. Another unit of Harbingers of Castamere, more Balakith Axe Guard, and then over here a couple of units of Balagyr Archers, which are not as good as the Balakith Marksmen, but with the armour upgrade perhaps they're not too far off and they are cheaper. And another unit of Axe Guard. Excuse me. Then we have Mr. Susan 8, who has got more Balakith Shield Bearers over here, Corsair Blackguards, again the third and final Umbar army I believe, Balakith Axe Guard, Alcarondas Legion, some more Naruna Iroh Guard and some Harbingers of Castamere. I don't think there's any brand new units that we've seen. There's not, to be fair, we've seen pretty much all of the Umbar roster at this point, bar their cavalry. So I don't really think there's anything else we could have seen. Actually, no, there is. There's Balagyr Pikemen in there, silly me. So he has elected to bring quite a few Phalanx units, which could be useful late on if he has a bit of restraint. And then last, but by no means least, we have the Silver and Blue army of Dol Amroth, commanded by Lord Touchme. A classic name there. Dorananil archers with the armour upgrade on the front line, so once again going for that heavy archer. None of their heavier archers are all that damaging the attackers, but that's not the idea behind them. They will try and wear down the defending armies. The upgraded Athalond men-at-arms will perform much the same role as the Alcarondas Legion, albeit to a lesser extent. They're not quite the same sort of unit really in terms of quality. More Dorananil archers, a couple of units of Belfalas Marines, very similar to the Pelagia Marines over on the other side. They do have an axe though, which would indicate they're slightly more damaging. A couple of units of Athalond Halberdiers, very useful for their armour piercing of course. Here is the heavy swordsman I mentioned in passing earlier, the mighty Haven Guard, with their winged helms. There's a catapult back there which is pointing the wrong way, but I'm sure that will be remedied as the battle gets underway. More Athalond Halberdiers. The Black Swan Renegades, which are a more impressive unit than the Balakith Shield Bearers, but you would expect it because they're also quite expensive for what they are. But that armour piercing will be useful nonetheless. More some Tirithea marksmen, and some upgraded Dorananil pikemen as well. Quite a small Dol Amroth army actually, going for quite a few of the high quality units. Will that pay off when he's all on his lonesome up here? We shall have to wait and see. Now, for the defenders, we shall start off with Mac, playing as one of the Cardolan armies. Got some Minhiriath men-at-arms, very similar to the basic Athalond men-at-arms across from them, but they don't have an armour upgrade to gain, so it'll be interesting to see how they work. Should be quite numerous, actually, the defenders by comparison, because Cardolan can field quite a lot of units like this, the Greenway Garrison Footmen, which are very cost-effective, so they should be able to hold the line with numbers for quite a while here. Oh, excuse me, hopefully my voice isn't going just on the eve of a work trip. That would be most unfortunate. Dunedain Captains with an armour upgrade, one of the better units that Cardolan can field of course, but can they crack through all of the heavily armoured units they'll be up against? Minhiriath Sharpshooters, this is really the main thing that Cardolan are going to be bringing to the field today, in addition to perhaps some Dunedain Rangers. The fact that they can put down a lot of ranged punch with their crossbowmen, and of course the Minhiriath Sharpshooters pull out a mace in melee, so they really are a really good all-round unit to have in a situation like this. And here are the Cardolan-inspired Dunedain Rangers, and also some bandits, some basic javelins, so cheap and cheerful units for the most part we've seen from Cardolan so far. Up here on this hill we've got some more Minhiriath Sharpshooters, some Menotar Romen Gatekeepers with their halberds in melee, and of course the very tanky Hearthguard of Amon Sul. On an individual basis, perhaps the tankiest unit of archers on the field, even more so than the Naruna Aru Royal Guard with their second hit point. Minhiriath Men-at-Arms, more Greenway Garrison Footmen. A very key unit is going to be the Wardens of Tir Gorthad, because they are a higher quality unit of pikes, and indeed there weren't any of the really high tier pikes from the attackers we saw today, so this could be the sort of unit which is really, really handy. Minhiriath Spearmen, which are going to be good for holding the line. There is a bit of cavalry they could use to sally out with. Once again, it's a unit of multiple HP Lancers, the heavily armoured Royal Court of House Thorondor. Very striking looking unit they are, with their almost brass coloured armour. More Dunedain Captains, more Bandits, and we've also got some more Minhiriath Spears. Quality may be the issue in large parts here for Cardolan. Do they have enough to withstand the attackers indefinitely throughout the fight? More Sharpshooters. Surprised we haven't run into the second player. And here he is, Grizzly Fox, who is playing as the other Cardolan army. He's got some mercenary guildsmen, a lower end but armour piercing unit of line infantry. Really got to be careful with their morale though. Cardolan have got low morale anyway, mercenaries have low morale. It's not a great combination from that perspective, but they are cost effective in melee if you can keep them fighting and well backed up. Minhiriath Archers, more mercenaries, more pikes. We have the first of the Numenorian players units here. We have Coffee once again, who is playing as Numenor. Got some Numenorian cohorts up here. The quality is going to have to be really handled by Numenor for the most part. I mean, Cardolan are not a low quality faction, but they certainly don't have access to higher tier units in the same number that the likes of Numenor and Umbar do, or indeed Dol Amroth and Gondor, come to think of it. Minhiriath Sharpshooters are here, maybe slightly more with Gondor. We have some more Dunedain Rangers. Tharbad Warhammers, very, very important unit here because of the massive amounts of armour-piercing damage they can do in melee. Thieves of Tharbad have got those armour-piercing projectiles, another assassin unit this time for Cardolan. Minhiriath Sharpshooters, more cohort in the background there. A second unit of Hearthguard of Amon Sul. They don't lack for numbers though, Cardolan here. Plenty of Minhiriath units that they can use to hold the line. It's just going to come down to how wisely they can use their ammunition. That is going to be the key for this battle. Another unit of Dunedain Captains wielding their long swords. Wardens of Tir Gorthad. So the Gatekeepers we've already mentioned. Numenorian Shield Guard, Numenorian Steel Bows, so armour-piercing spears and archers here. We don't have much for defence on this gate, though. It'll be interesting to see if they decide to pull back more quickly than we're used to. Perhaps stubbornly holding on to the front lines is something which we've seen too much of recently, so it might be for the best. Numenorian cohorts over here, I mean, over here they're bulking up on this gate, but there's not much over here to defend against. Plenty of shield guard, plenty of standard Numenorian units. Lots of spears. Another unit of cav, which can go out Pharazim nobles. Could be really deadly. I mean, they have a better charge than most other units of high tier melee cavalry, but they are still not the same as lance knights. But it's also the sort of thing that the Gondor cavalry won't really want to try and counteract, to be honest. Ardenheim Shadowbow, so more body piercing projectiles with another unit of Numenorian cohort. There was a unit we almost missed out up here as well as a ballista. Again, marooned, another unit of artillery which has just been left out on its lonesome. That unit of ballista piece will be very important regardless of how the defenders try to spin it. If they lose it for nothing, it doesn't bode well for them. Royal Legion of Armenelos, the extremely powerful Pharazim Swordmasters, and a unit we've already seen fighting for the other side, the Naru Royal Guard, clad in the navy blue of Numenor rather than the burgundy of Umbar. So, I would imagine we don't have to wait too long because the artillery is already bombarding the walls, but I will make a little bit of a cut and we shall rejoin when the attackers are assailing the walls of the Grey Havens. So, unsurprisingly, we are going to be starting off with a bit of a bombardment from the attackers here. The Gondorian catapult is going to start peeling away at the outer walls of the Grey Havens and just having, again, a cursory glance over the attacking armies here. I do like the fact that they're all Numenorian factions means that they're all going to have certain similarities, but we do have the opposite ends of the spectrum, especially with the defenders, with Cardolan and Numenor being on the defence, with Numenor being probably the most quality-centric of all of these factions, marginally so over Umbar I would suggest, and then Cardolan being a little bit more numbers heavy, but I do like the combination of Cardolan and Numenor on the defence. Cardolan's crossbows in particular, you can see here, and here they have sharpshooters getting in formation, ready and waiting to start firing on the attackers. Can be such a difficult thing to advance through. That armour piercing damage really sets them apart, and they add rangers into that as well. Obviously in the current version of the game, rangers still very much the body piercing monsters that we all know them to be. There goes the first section of wall that the Gondorians have knocked down. The criticism you could level at Cardolan though is that while they are pretty good at holding the line, even with some of their lower tier units, they do lack a little bit of the damage dealing capability that some of the other factions on the field today possess. But Numenor more than make up for that, of course, so that means that they should be able to have a good amount of synergy. The attackers, on the other hand, Umbar a little bit more so with their upfront heavy infantry, Gondor as well, but with more of a spear focus, so Umbar the more aggressive of the two, you would suggest, which should make them a little bit better in this sort of situation. And then you have Arthur Dane, who add in a very, very substantial archer force, which is a little bit more well-rounded than Gondor's, which once again is a little bit more defensive in nature. See a few volleys coming over the wall from Beastie 70. His Belagaia archers. Not the most damaging of archers. And again, all of these Minhiriath units have got the armour and shields from the front to be able to withstand basic arrow fire without too many difficulties, and Cardolan will be pretty pleased if they are the target. Pharazim nobles, meanwhile, coming in. They're taking a good amount of damage here on the approach from the Corsair infantry, but undoubtedly here, what Coffey would have been going for would have been the Corsair crossmen, and he did manage to get a charge off into them. Honestly, Ruvig may very well have been better off there having his crossbow shoot the Pharazim nobles on the approach. They still would have taken a pretty hefty charge, but the crossbow bolts would have done pretty heavy damage indeed to the Pharazim nobles on the approach, whereas from the front, with their armour, multiple HP and their shields, the arrows of the Corsair infantry aren't going to be doing too much damage here to the finest cavalry that Numenor can field. Numenorians not known for their cavalry, of course, but what little they do have is still of the level of quality you would expect from their military force. Royal Court of House Thorondor actually more devastating on the charge than the Pharazim nobles. They wield a lance rather than a sword after all, but they do need to be very, very careful here. Dol Amroth here on the attack. Again, maybe they do have a few gaps in their infantry roster, very similar to Gondor in that respect, but if you charge in unthinkingly, you'll find yourself in a spider's web of Athalond halberdiers getting peppered by Belfalas Marines. There's a lot of armour-piercing damage. The Doranonil archers are firing in. Yeah, the Royal Court of House Thorondor needs to be careful. I mean, the Doranonil archers won't do too much damage to the Royal Court of House Thorondor. Again, they're heavily armoured and shielded. They will do chip damage over time, so you can't afford to hang around too long, but it's not a devastating thing to have a few hits landed from a Cardolan perspective. Meanwhile, over here there are a ton of siege towers here from Mr. Susan, who has got his heavy infantry ready to go. Grizzly Fox has got a single unit of Dunedain captains on the wall. As strong as they are, they won't be able to fight all on their own if Umbar really decide to try and test them. Mercenary Guildsman taking some hits from the Corsair Blackguard. I mean, this will devastate the Mercenary Guildsman, but it's not the biggest loss to the defenders. That armor piercing is useful, but the Mercenary Guildsmen will find themselves substantially outperformed, especially by the Umbar heavy infantry that's over in this part of the battlefield. But still, we can't afford to be taking losses for free. Minhiriath sharpshooters taking some hits over the wall as well. Once again, Belagar archers taking a few pot shots. Again, going about your business in that way means that you are going to miss quite a few shots. They're not going to be quite as devastating as they could be, but you are still potentially worrying the defenders. Our Beastie 70 still just hanging out. He is, of course, going to have Gondor following him in as well. So this is probably where the attackers are at their very strongest, because you've got two armies coming through here, Umbar and Gondor. So it would behoove the defenders to really stack up quite heavily over on this side of things, I think, and they haven't actually done that at the moment. Grizzly Fox has only got a few units from his Cardolan army over here, so I would be a little bit careful if I were the defenders in this situation. But we can see the first real big melee push over here. The Numenorians and the Black Numenorians facing off against one another. And we can see here Numenorian steel bows forced into melee. I'm not sure whether they used up their ammunition. If they did, then it's an interesting thing. I'd be surprised if they used up their ammunition that quickly, but possibly. Thieves of Tharbad, meanwhile, in guard mode and just standing and shooting, even though they're getting shanked in the back, but in so doing, they're really making life very uncomfortable for the Alcarondas Legion. Those throwing knives in the back, having to deal with Numenor heavy infantry from the front. This will cost the Thieves of Tharbad dearly, but Ruvik is going to be persuaded to commit more units in. Balakith Marksmen are here. There's a lot of Alcarondas Legion in here already, though, which is forcing Numenor's hand a little bit. If they want to keep up the defence over here, they will need to come to the aid of the Minhiriath Spearmen, because they will be outperformed by the Umbar infantry in melee. But together, with their powers combined, they will have more than enough to keep Umbar at bay. But Umbar do have a bit of an opportunity here. If they decide to spill in with all of their units, they could get in and around these units, but they are on their own over here. It's only a singular army, and still these Pharaohs and Nobles are proving to be a real pain, quite literally, in Umbar's rear. They are starting to take a fair amount of losses now, though. The hit points will be gone. The crossbows are now doing what I would have suggested in the first place and just turning around and shooting. They've taken a lot of losses, but at this point they just need to get these Pharaohs and Nobles off their back, so all of these units here can get into the settlement and start really consolidating the gains that Ruvik has made, because he is in a race against the clock here. If his army stays with its attentions divided, as they are at the moment, he could be in for a world of hurt. We shall see. Meanwhile, once again, the Gondorians moving in, and they are going to be able to get in and around Grizzly Fox's front line. The Minhiriath spears trying to hold on, but these Gondor spears are going to get around them. And more worryingly, this is a combined assault over here. The spears of Gondor and the swords of Umbar crashing against the shield wall that Cardolan had set up. And that's bad news for them. Balakith's shield bearers are in here as well. That armor piercing will be useful. But over here, these two units, when they're fighting together, Wardens of Tir Gorthad and Dunedain captains, will be more than up to the task. Problem is, they could easily get cut off over here. They are getting range support. Minotaur Roman Gatekeeper shooting in. Now that the attackers are exposed a little bit, and now with some Numenorian cohort coming in as well, this could be really damaging for the attackers, but they do have more numbers than the defenders to withstand this sort of thing. Thieves of Tharbad over there fighting off against Balakith Marksmen. The Numenor Ballista firing away as well. And once again, the crossbows doing their thing. This is where Cardolan's crossbows can really earn their keep, because the attackers are getting into the settlement. They're not contesting the walls as violently as perhaps we've seen in the past on the Grey Havens. But this does give them perhaps a little bit more of an opportunity, a little bit more space to use their ranged units in an efficient manner. Over here, meanwhile, Umbar definitely holding back, trying to skirmish with the enemy a little bit more, which is understandable given what Umbar's strengths are. But they haven't really got too much to show for it at the moment. I would suggest they may be better off just trying to push inwards. Dol Amroth doing much the same sort of thing. Doranonal archers just taking some pot shots over the wall. Max Cardolan army still remaining largely untouched. A few casualties here and there from these archer volleys. Tirithea marksmen shooting into the Minhiriath sharpshooters in the back, but a difficult unit to skirmish unless you've got some serious damage behind you, because they do have decent armour, decent shields. Not insurmountable, but it's going to take quite a few volleys before you really make the impression that you want, and it does require a clearer shot than I would suggest they have. Corsair infantry getting into melee, this is of course their utility, especially with that armour upgrade. They can get into melee and actually be somewhat helpful, but you can see here that Ruvik, having his army split like this single unit of Pharaohs and Nobles really has proven to be such a pain for Umbar, because they haven't been able to focus as much as they otherwise would have done, and as a result this first force that they sent in here was denied its reinforcements for too long. Umbar, I think, are going to get a little bit lucky here with Numenor's retreat, but they have been made to take an awful lot of casualties here. Umbar, Ruvik's army certainly the most damaged of all the attackers so far, but they are going to move in. This may be an enforced retreat, I'm not sure. I mean, Numenor can't afford to retreat too far, otherwise Ruvik could still be a very decisive factor in this battle and come over here to defeat what's left of Cardolan as they continue to try and hold back the Gondorian and Umbar advance over here. Those Dunedain captains doing a good job against the Gondor spearmen, but it's a matter of sheer numbers at this point that Gondor are winning by. Gondor spearmen are over here. I mean, they've committed forward their Tharbad Warhammers. This really is the exception to the rule in Cardolan. This is their one truly exceptional damage dealing unit. The Dunedain captains are all well and good, but among bodyguard heavy swordsmen, there are plenty that are better. There's not too many armour-piercing bodyguards, though, that can outperform the Tharbad Warhammers. More arrows coming down from on high into that Umbar position. Still some Warns of Tin Gorthad alive, but Cardolan just spread a little bit too thin, trying to cover too much ground here. And Umbar and Gondor, slowly but surely, are making the most of that. Oof, and that's why frame rate was tanking a little bit. It's because of the Dunedain Rangers, and they are picking perhaps a good time to shoot in here, actually. The green hue of the Dunedain Rangers in the Cardolan variant. You can see there the axes of the Balakith Axe Guard in the distance as well, but it's Cardolan in this situation when their line starts faltering. Obviously the morale can start to tank pretty quickly, and that's another one of the downsides of playing as the middleman with Dunedain support. Mac, meanwhile, over here, still all quiet on the northern front, at least on this gate. Are they going to start moving in now? Belfalas Marines trying to just poke their head in, perhaps? And shore up the line, but they do need to be a little bit careful here. And here are some Dol Amroth forces. The first steps they are going to take into the settlements over here is going to be some Athalon men-at-arms claiming the walls. They are going to be met in battle by the Dunedain captains. Now, of course, the men from Dol Amroth will really struggle in this particular matchup, but just the fact that they're putting pressure on the Cardolan defence is good. Ah yes, the classic Greyhaven's glitch, where when you're using the siege towers, some of your men fall to their doom. Not quite so many as I'm used to, actually. Under normal circumstances, really quite a lot of them end up perishing. Meanwhile, Dunedain captains guarding that entrance. The Greenway Garrison footmen actually forcing the retreat of the Doranonal pikemen, but a big part of that, of course, is the support they have. There's bandits in the backfield, there's also those crossbows. Didn't go very well for those pikemen from Dol Amroth, and indeed they do retreat. Black Swan Renegades going to start engaging with the Minhiriath men-at-arms, and this is a fight which, depending on the amount of losses they take, the Black Swan Renegades should fairly easily win, but if they take a lot of losses from plummeting to their doom, then the Minhiriath men-at-arms may very well be able to carry the day. I'll have to wait and see, but again, that's going to be a difficult unit for Cardolan to deal with in pure melee terms. Over here it's a little bit different. The Dunedain captains will be up to the challenge of dealing with those mace men. The armour piercing not quite so useful against Dunedain units, who prioritise in perhaps a little bit more of an elven fashion their melee defence. Other units they leave the heavy armour to. Gondor archers starting to return fire into the ranged units that are up on that hilltop. Numenorian cohort coming downhill, so they have actually reinforced over here. Minotaur Roman gatekeepers out of ammunition, pulling out their billhooks and starting to lay down a bit of AP damage in melee against the Alcarondas Legion. And actually, Minhiriath sharpshooters as well, pulling out those maces. All of this armour-piercing damage paying dividends here against Umbar. Ravenhelm's of Caer Andros in battle as well. There's quite a big Gondorian presence over here, and it's not quite an organised front line, you'd have to say. with the Minhiriath Spearmen looking like they could rout. They're in more of a block than a line. Gondor archers firing, and there's still that catapult to consider as well. They've only knocked one hole in the wall, so Gondor should still have a bit of ammunition. Ruvik, however, coming back with a vengeance here. He's got some Balakith marksmen in behind enemy lines. They're taking hits from the Ardenheim shadow bows, but Ruvik should be happy about that. That's ranger ammunition which is being used to counter skirmish, essentially. And ultimately, his Balakith marksmen are still doing some good damage. Still getting some good hits into the back of an admittedly very tanky unit of Hearthguard of Amon Sul. And then there's all of this heavily armoured Numenorian infantry as well. The Shield Guard laying down their own armour-piercing damage. The Harbingers struggling because they're pretty much all on their own. They're a very strong unit, but they're really learning what it's like to be on the receiving end of aggressive Numenorian infantry. Umbar being introduced to the OGs. Of course, their crossbows in melee, not where they want to be. They've had a bit of a torrid time, but considering the hand Ruvik was dealt, I think he's done pretty well. I think he is ultimately going to lose as more reinforcements are on their way down here, and he doesn't have the quality on the front line to deal with all these Numenorians. But he's done a pretty good job considering, and he's buying time and attention away from his allies over here. The Gondorians and the Umbaran doing their thing. That's more clear projectiles. That's a bit better of a target for those Dunedain Rangers firing into those Raven Helms. There's some Gondor Spearmen that are routing as well. Better for them. I think in the north, Umbar need to start being a little bit more aggressive, and it looks as though they have been very aggressive all at once. Alcarondas Legion pushing all the way through to the Tharbad Warhammers. Mercenary Guildsmen are broken and fighting to the death. Those Ardenheim Shield Guard pushing in. This is a little bit more like it. A lot more like it. There goes an Umbar General. Beasties in particular. Minhiriath Sharpshooters trying to stand and shoot, unsurprisingly. They really want to be using those bolts as best they can. But yeah, not enough on this front line, which is one of the problems that there has been on all the front lines so far. Yes, the defenders can use this to their advantage with clearer shots for their ranged units, crossbows, rangers, and the like. But it's so risky because if you end up leaving too little on the front line, as Umbar proved here, when they do decide to be aggressive, they could potentially just blow right through your defensive position. And so it has turned out to be. Umbar now need to follow through on this and continue to send infantry in. That's what they're doing. Balagai pikemen to try and shore things up. Still have some Axe Guard in here as well. They could end up being overwhelmed. This is all about teamwork from an attacking perspective. They need to make it so the defenders can't focus them down one by one. And Dol Amroth are moving in as well, taking a bit of damage from those bandits as they throw their javelins in. And so far, Dol Amroth are contained by the Cardolan garrison in the north. You can see over here as well, these Dunedain captains still fighting the good fight. There's still 23 of them left, and they're finishing off these Belfalas Marines that were feeling confident. They shouldn't have been when Dunedain captains were involved, but there you are. Doran Ernal archers also not going to be up to the task of bringing down Minhiriath men-at-arms in a pure melee fight. So far, if I were the defenders, it's a bit of a mixed one, this. It's hard to tell where it's going to go, because I think this is going to come down to how well the defenders can retain some of their ammunition for the late game. Are they going to have those resources available to them for when the going gets tough later on? Bandits being committed to the front line, they're obviously not very good in melee, but needs must. A little bit of support for those pikes, buying more time for their fellow bandits to do damage with those javelins. Dol Amroth trying to force their way in again, but these very depleted units of pikes, and again, more hits from the rangers. They don't need to be shooting with this much of their ammunition. I think this is where we could see a bit of a difference made. They've already got Dol Amroth on the ropes over here. They actually don't need to be using ammunition at all, I would say. So it is a bit of a waste. So Dol Amroth should actually be pleased that their pikes are attracting that kind of attention. There goes... Wait, that was a Cardolan general. Which is bad signs for Cardolan. Castamir's Rangers, that's an important tool for Ruvik to have kept hold of as well. And actually it does look as though he's going to be the outright winner over here, which is quite impressive. Corsair Fencers getting into position. Coffee maybe thinking he had Ruvik's infantry banged to rights, and he did, but unfortunately for him, Ruvik has managed to outmaneuver him with some skirmishes, and as a result pulled off quite an impressive victory. And that is a good sign for the attackers moving forward in this battle. Citadel Guard and Ravenhelms moving in, fresh units of them. They're starting to set their armies up over here. These Dunedain Rangers, presumably out of ammunition, being used as a bit of a distraction tool, I think, for Cardolan and Numenor to start retreating back through the settlement. In Lothian Honor Guard. Tough unit to bring down in the late game if you don't have something like crossbows to do it for you. Both Cardolan and Numenor will really not appreciate being in melee with them. That armor piercing, that high defensive value, all that you would need in the late game to be a problem. Tharbad Warhammers using their armor piercing to crack through the upgraded armor of the Belagaya pikemen. And then there's the Balakath Guard trying to answer with their own AP damage, but they're being schooled in what a true great weapon unit is here. And here we have sharpshooters in the background, some mercenary guildsmen perhaps being used as, again, the sacrificial lambs to try and get those 31 Tharbad Warhammers back to the town centre perhaps, to try and defend. Not too surprising. This is a key phase of the battle for the attackers. If they can really make some gains here, start killing off a lot of the defenders, they can make it an insurmountable task for them to try and just hold the TC and win. We've seen time and time again this stage of the battle, not just on this map, but on any siege map really. When the defenders elect that now is the time to mass retreat, gaps can be found and the attackers can really pull out a lead which the defenders can never recover from. Be interesting to see if that is the case. I mean, just look over here, these Minhiria spearmen and bandits will be left behind to die, and it's a lot of fighting men that are going to ultimately be left to their own devices. Quick look at the underside of the map there. Gondor moving forward as well, and the attackers could continue to push forward here and start to at least put a little bit of range pressure maybe on the TC before the defenders are actually set. If they manage to do that, it's going to be tough, I would say, for them to recover the defenders. Meanwhile, Cardolan's still doing pretty well here in the north, but with units like the Haven Guard on the way, all these basic Minhiria soldiers are ultimately going to fall by the wayside at some stage. Elfmas Marines on the way forwards, trying to deal with these Warns of Tir and Gorthad. That's an important unit to save for the late game as well, just because they can hold the line really nicely. Pikes in the late game, whether for the attackers or the defenders, can be such a useful thing. Even if it's something like Greenway Garrison Footmen, but I get the feeling these guys are going to be left behind, and Dol Amroth will be free to try and cut them down at their leisure. Looks like Dol Amroth is going to give up on attacking the northern gate for the time being, get his halberdiers back round over here. The rest of these units are all retreating. Well, there goes the general, the hands of bandits. I think that was Mr. Susan's general. Unfortunate for him. I mean, Umbar's morale is such that the loss of a general is not a crippling blow, but it could still be of real help. So fair play to the bandits managing to bring down one of the Umbar generals today. Goes to show that there is a little bit of chance involved with this sort of thing. You can't be sure that your general won't go really deep into enemy territory like he just did. The catapult here in this little garden area. As the Gondorians continue to push forward, the Mithrandir's retinue haven't been used yet, and to be honest, their usefulness in this battlefield is probably already at an end. I would have suggested getting in the way of the Royal Court of House Thorondor, or especially the Farazan nobles, to buy Ruvik a little bit more breathing space. Would have been the best use for them. They would have lost to the Farazan nobles fairly handily, of course, but at this point in the battlefield, like, what are they going to be useful for? If they manage to push their way through to the TC, it's a sign that, to be honest with you, the defenders were already on their last legs and would have lost anyway. Other than that, they're going to be charging into well-prepared front lines that include pikes, spears, backed up by ranged units. It's probably not going to go too well, although they could attack. I mean, this maybe is their one opportunity. Trying to run down some of these fleeing units. There's 3 Royal Court of House Thorondor that are routing. They could go after the Tharbad Warhammers, you know. That would be a very good catch indeed, and there's still those Cardolan units that are fighting against Dol Amroth on one of the northern gates. Tharbad Warhammers are too juicy of a target to ignore, surely, for Runoska. Well, I spoke too soon. They were not juicy enough. I mean, he could charge into the Warns of Tir and Gorthad, but this could be disastrous. They haven't got their pikes lowered. No, it wasn't a charge though, they didn't get their lances down, so they're just going to bump into the pikemen, and this is going to be not great for the Gondorian riders. They are going to suffer at the hands of those pikes. That's his general as well, so he can't really afford to lose his general too clumsily. That morale loss could yet prove to be a decisive factor. We shall have to wait and see. They're off again. I mean, he might have bought enough time for infantry to catch up to the Warns of Tir and Gorthad, and indeed he has. So maybe it was worthwhile. There's a lot of moving parts in a battle like this. Swords drawn. I'm just interested to see if he can utilise these Mithrandir's retinue well, because as soon as the defenders are set and in position, it's going to be so hard for them to get good value off. They could charge here into the Minhiriash sharpshooters. They've got a good opening. They've armor piercing, and oh, he pulled out. He could have charged there, and that would have been a good opportunity to get some good damage done. Go after the Dunedain captains instead. No, a little bit of indecision creeping in here. It is his general, so maybe it's a little understandable, but at the same time, you had a good opportunity there to go after Dunedain captains and sharpshooters, do a bit of damage, make a dent in Cardolan's infantry power going into the late game. Are they going to get their lances down? They are. That was a little bit better. In and around the tree, so it wasn't a completely clean charge, but you can see there the man count of the Minhiriash sharpshooters is going to go down. Not a devastating charge by any means, but he at least recognised the vulnerabilities there. Doesn't look like there's much going on over here. Gondor setting up in a very solid fashion. Very dense. There's some Athelian rangers in there, which will certainly worry the defenders if they can get into a good position. And finally, the Greenway Garrison footmen can do rout. Dol Amroth now have an unobstructed path into the Grey Havens. Valakith Axguard leaving. And whatever became of those Warns of Tir Gorthad, I would assume they were surrounded and destroyed? No, there's still 34 of them. They are scattered by all accounts. What on earth is going on with this unit? There's 5 of them there. The rest of them are further forward, so it'll be a bit annoying to control a unit such as that. I still don't fancy their chance of getting back into the TC though. If these Corsair Blackguards can target them down with those jabbies, it's going to be quite a painful experience for them. They're going to shuffle off that way. And try and finish off the sharpshooters, and they will succeed. So the Mithrandir's retinue, while they are quite an expensive unit to use for these purposes, they are at least seeing some use, so fair play to the Gondorian player here. Corsair Blackguards moving forward. Umbar, maybe Ruvik being very aggressive here, maybe trying to catch out these pikes as they get back into defensive position. Numenorian steel bows, looks like they've got their swords and shields out, so it'll be interesting to see if they have ammunition still available to them as the Greenway Garrison footmen retreat. Blackguards. I mean, if they're out of ammunition, I mean, if they can stop the Greenway Garrison footmen from getting their pikes down in formation, the Blackguards will easily kill them in close quarters, but the pikes do turn around. They're getting a little bit of support from some archers in behind them. Don't know if Ruvik's got any other units close by. Castamir's Rangers. This is absolutely the sort of unit the defenders need to be targeting down and not allowing the attackers to use effectively. At all costs, they need to be stopped. Still some Mithrandir's retinue, and they are, well, I mean, the Warns of Tir Gorthad will go down fighting, but they should be finished off here because they're not in formation, and even a higher end unit of pikes like this have got relatively poor melee stats. Their strength comes from their animation and the length of their weaponry. And so our Roman Gatekeeper's getting into place. Like I said, if they have the ammunition. Now an Overall Guard. Again, maybe a little bit too careless for my liking. This sort of thing. They have a ballista, which could be really useful. I mean, you can shoot fairly nicely along these bridges. So that sort of tool could be nice. In fact, Mac has managed to get some of these Wards of Tir Gorthad. Not a decisive amount by any means, but still, they got back. They're wavering now as the Castamir's Rangers and Mithrandir's retinue continue their unrelenting pursuit. You can see the difference in the quality of the textures between the sides of the bridge here and the road. That looks like an early PS1 texture. When you get close to it, it's a bit weird. Over here, Corsair Blackguard's victory almost a certainty. Thieves of Tharbad trying to use their throwing projectiles, their daggers, to do their thing. Oof. They're starting to creep through that one unit of Greenway Garrison footmen. I mean, they're doing damage here, but it's the Castamir's Rangers that are presumably out of ammunition again. Choice of target is key here. And if this is allowed to continue, this waste of their valuable ammunition, like I said, I think that will end up being the difference between the two sides. Catapult as well could bombard the TC. A few lucky hits to soften them up, and then a full-blooded assault from the Gondorians here could be the way that they go on to win this. Gondor look as though they're almost alone down here. Beastie 70's Umbar forces that remain are going to follow him, and now clearly Umbar doing the lion's share of the work on the outer gates, as evidenced by the fact they've taken more losses by a substantial margin, but Gondor in good shape now to try and wrest control of the TC away. There's actually still a red arrow over here. And indeed, it is a duel. It's a Dunedain captain, and he loses to the Mithlond halberdier. He was bloody, to be fair, but had armour-piercing damage and brutalised by that halberdier, so fair play. Killing a soldier which 1v1 you would not expect him to. That man's due a promotion. Make him an officer in his next unit. There's Mithrandir's retinue. 20 of them still remain, which is fairly impressive. They're bloodied up, a testament to how tanky they actually are. They may not be knights, they may only be multiple HP lancers, but they are very tanky, and they don't suffer too much from their movement speed either, like some other really heavy cavalry tends to do. The Mithrandir's retinue have always felt fairly agile to me, so maybe not quite as fast as something like the Black Serpents, but they're fast enough. And so Roman gatekeepers with their crossbows out, but they don't have any other units of infantry in front of them. They're going to rely on those Minhiriath sharpshooters getting in the way. Maces and shields at the ready. And we are rapidly closing in now on the final 10,000 thrones. We're not quite there yet, but you can tell that this is going to be the final phase of the battle. It's always a reliable measure to use, it seems. Not using the flaming shot, which I think is a bit of a mistake. That splash damage will be useful even on units that are in loose formation like this. Even so, this will still be a problem for the defenders, because they're going to have to just sit here and take it, really. They're not going to be able to kill the catapult crew off quickly enough to prevent all of the ammunition from being used, and if you can't do that, then what's the point? So in many ways they'll be quite glad to not see the flaming ammunition come their way. Numenorian steel bows that are out of ammunition are going to form the first line of defence over here. Maybe a few too many skirmishers that are out of ammunition are making up the main body of the defending lines here. Let's just have a look over here. That battered unit of Tharbad Warhammers. They do have Pharazim Swordmasters still, and the Royal Legion of Almedalos, and another unit of upgraded Dunedain Captains, so they're not completely bereft of quality here going into the late game, but I don't know. I think it is going to be a challenge for the defenders to win from here. I'm not sure whether they have enough left in the bank from their skirmishers either to really be a threat. Sharpshooters, maces at the ready. Still those Greenway Garrison footmen, I've got to give them credit. They've been the last to rout on their front lines, these brave militiamen. Cheap pikes, a tool that is useful for many factions, and Cardolan very high up on that list. I mean, the Harbingers of Castamere will make the difference now, but there's not enough of them, I don't think. 25 of them against a fully healthy unit of Minhiriath sharpshooters. Again, I can hear the whistle of crossbows, but it's... You don't need to worry too much about these Harbingers of Castamere. There's not enough of them. The armour piercing will make the difference. You've got Thieves of Tharbad on station to commit into melee should they be required, but I doubt it. Clear projectiles from Castamere's Rangers, another unit of attacking Rangers as well, going after the Thieves of Tharbad. A problem for them. They do still have crossbow bolts, that's the thing, they still have ammunition, they just need to be very careful with how they use it. And also, how aggressive do the attackers want to be? I mean, at some point they're going to have to commit forwards. They are going to have to take losses in some substantial fashion at some stage. The only Numenorian faction to not be on the field today is, of course, Arthedain. Amroth and Onagard coming forward on their own. I mean, they're a strong unit, but it's a bit of a bold move. There's Numenorian steel bows in fairly large quantities, along with Numenorian cohort. Between the two of them, I mean, it'll still be a bloody fight for the Numenorian defenders here without any sort of support. But I'm a little bit surprised to not see any infantry support coming forward from Gondor. It's putting a lot of faith in this admittedly strong unit, but yeah, you can see that the numbers here, the units that they're sending them against are no pushovers. The steel bows may be archers, but they're archers that in melee can hold their own, and then the cohort are among one of the better units of upper end line infantry you can bring, outside of bodyguard units of course. Trying to burrow into this Numenorian line, but that's just going to make it easier for those swords to find their marks, as well as the spears from the Gondorians. Meanwhile, those Dunedain Rangers out of ammunition by the looks of things, pulling out their swords, closing into melee. Going to help out the Minhiriath sharpshooters bring down the battered remnants that Umbar seem to be sending forward, but I mean they are forcing Cardolan to mass up a little bit here. On the front line, I can hear a helicopter outside. Now an Royal Guard shooting into the sides, and Dunedain Rangers are not the tankiest of units when dealing with projectiles such as this. Maces are here, Thalond Halberdiers, we've already seen one of them in particular be very impressive. Is that him? I would assume it is, because he's a unit of one marching forward. He's not done yet, he wants more blood. It might be his own by the end of the day though. A little bit of support coming forward for the Nimlothians now. Citadel Guard, that's more like it. Lots of armour piercing on the front line, which Numenor will not enjoy being up against. They've got the quality. And here we got some flaming shot as well. It goes long, but they are presumably aiming for that unit of 60 Minhiriath sharpshooters. A shot into the middle mass of that unit could be a problem, but the Grey Haven's coming to the aid of the defenders. The aqueduct's getting in the way. If they want that catapult to have a clear shot, they'll have to push it onto the bridge, where it will be a little bit more exposed to the defenders, but like I said, the defenders, there's not really much they can do about it. They won't kill off the entire unit before it can dump its ammo. Royal Legion of Armenelos and Pharazim Swordmasters taking javelin fire from those Pelagia Marines that are on the bridge. That's going to hurt them as well, because they've got a pretty good shot, those Pelagia Marines, and they really need their quality units to do a lot of the heavy lifting for them. This is the kind of thing which is going to push the fight more in favour of the attackers. Minhiriath sharpshooters, they're going to continue to try and do their thing, but it's a lot that they're going to have to deal with. The Gondorians, of all the attacking armies, were the ones that looked in the best condition going into these latter stages. Beastie 70 pushing forward with some Ardenium shield guard. That'll offer some more robust on the front line. Loads of really good tanky spears, but it's going to be really difficult for Numenor to cut through all of them at the speed they need to, and Pharazim Swordmasters, of course, a real problem in and of themselves, but being overwhelmed. Dunedain Rangers continuing to do their thing. Some Belagar archers, just really a distraction, this northern assault. They're just biding their time. Looks like they've got more skirmishers up here in the north now in Iron Royal Guard. Got some Harbingers, but they are a bit depleted. Of course, their Blackguards are over here, so yeah, maybe a little bit more battered and bruised, but they need to keep up the pressure so the defenders can't focus all of their defence just on this side. I mean, this is a good opportunity here for Coffee. This ballista could be the thing that turns the tide, but he's maybe waited just a little bit too long. Gondor undoubtedly seeing the threats that this artillery piece poses and managing to push just a small number of Pelagia Marines through to prevent that ballista from firing, and that front line only has so much life left in it. If they can continue to push through here, the attackers, you'd have to say that's going to be game, set and match to them.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Is that right? A pretty decent hit. We've seen more devastating hits, but at this stage in the game, killing that many gatekeepers is a really substantial thing. Bandits trying to get in the way now. 61 bandits trying to close the gap that the Pelagia Marines used, and they'll do so for at least a time. But against those heavy Gondor infantrymen and Umbar infantrymen, surely they won't last for too much longer. Those Pelagia Marines, though, really, a fair number of them got through actually, and those Tharbad Warhammers are going to have to try and get rid of them, because if they can hold on here, prevent that ballista from firing for as long as they possibly can, it's going to be a tough one for them. Dunedain captains getting into melee now. Mac committing forward those 44 heavy swordsmen, trying to do their thing. It is an even fight, and in fact the Numenor quality is doing its thing, so again, if they get that ballista to fire, it could be what they need, what they desperately need, but the longer that they can't do that, the more likely it is that the superior numbers of the attackers will eventually bring the defenders to heel, and of course the attacker artillery is still firing away. They've had some pretty rotten luck with it actually. Only one decent hit, the rest have all either sailed over or not been in flaming shot mode, thus reducing the damage that it does anyway. 15 Doran Ernil archers trying to chip in, contribute where they can. Haven Guard are back there as well as the Harbingers of Castamere. That is a really significant thing as well. I don't know if the defenders are going to have enough to deal with all of that. If they are, they're going to need to really put Gondor and Umbar here in the south to the sword quickly. As far as Swordmasters, Royal Legion, the finest that Numenor have to offer. You could say the finest that humankind in Middle-earth has to offer. Numenorian kind. Athenian Rangers with their swords out. Not sure if they've used up their ammunition or what, but they are pushing in. Wardens of the White Tower coming in to try and keep this Gondorian assault alive. Some of them are bloodied up already. Another unit of Citadel Guard as well. Again, it's a real mountain for the defenders to climb. Making a good fist of it here, but I just don't think they've got enough left. Oh yes, it's this announcer. My old friend. It is strange how some of the announcer sets seem to be a little bit more vocal than others. Easterling announcer is clearly the best. Enemy generals being bolder than roosters. Absolutely iconic. The Haven Guard now being committed in though, so a bit of quality coming from the north. That'll worry them in here as Sharpshoots. They've done very well for themselves, the Sharpshoots on this front line. They've really stood firm against a lot of threats, but this is where they're going to need a little bit of extra help, and that is where the Gatekeepers are going to join the fray. Going to try and use that armor piercing to good effect, but will it be enough against the Haven Guard? It won't be if there's more support coming their way, and indeed here come the Harbingers of Castamere to back them up. Two very different looking units in terms of the style they're going for, but still two very, very stylish units indeed. The grey, silver and winged approach of the Haven Guard, and then the black and gold, more menacing look of the Harbingers. Fighting side by side for once. Bit of a rare thing. Arrows coming overhead. It seems as though the attackers have got more ammunition left here in the late game than the defenders do. And while most of it is in basic archers, or archers that aren't really focused around dealing damage, that can still be a real difference maker. And you can see that there are a few shots coming from the other side of the bridge. The ballista now, however, is free. Those Pelagian Marines finally have been dealt with. And Gondor and Umbar here in the south have been contained. That ballista can start firing and crucially not get friendly fire. If you bisect your own line and cause it to rout, which is not impossible when you're talking about Cardolan. That would be a real tragedy, of course. Gondor archers. There goes another general. Could be the Gondorian general. Although I don't think so, because he was in the cavalry unit. I'm not sure he would have been committed. Another unit of Citadel Guard in the backfield. Naruna Royal Guard. It is close, this. That quality in the defence. There goes the Numenorian general. Again, much like Umbar, they aren't going to be quite so shaken as their Cardolan allies. More arrows flying overhead. They really need to get that ballista in action. A little bit more of a linear firing arc, unlike the catapult, so it's understandable why they're having a little bit more trouble. Dunedain captains from Mac leaving the other front line and coming over here to try and go sword to sword with the Haven Guard and Harbingers of Castamere, but this is what I'm talking about. Even with the armour upgrade, they're not going to be as good as those other two, and as if that wasn't enough, we're also going to see some Naruna Royal Guard, I believe this is them, yes, join the front line as well. Very heavy spears, which are just going to give that solidity to this attack from the north. What else they have? They've got some blackguards, some out of ammunition rangers, just committing everything forward, trying to flex their muscles a little bit. Arrows sail overhead. I don't think they have anything else to commit over here though. So I mean, this is pretty much it from the north. Outside of these ranged units, they're going all in. So it's now really that the attackers need to start seeing the defenders start to falter. Half Guard around on the Soul, of course, good at holding the line. Again, another example of a unit there that doesn't really do a ton of damage. They're just there for defensive purposes. Pharazim's sword mass is still 27 of them left alive, which given the amount of pressure they've been under is impressive in itself. All of them caked in blood. Their enemies and their own. Balagar archers routed. Having a look on this front line though, there's not an awful lot of quality left. There's still some Limnothian Honour Guard, so the same goes for them as goes for the Numenorian infantry here. Especially considering they've been in and amongst the quality fight this whole time. There's some Harbingers in there from Beastie 70 trying to do their thing. That unit of Citadel Guard. There's still another unit of Citadel Guard and Raven Helms that can be committed for, which are pretty good, but is it going to be enough? Is it going to be enough for the attackers? This has been a good one. Of course, that's supposed to be the ocean, but because of a bug which has been in the game for a long time at this point, it is a sheer cliff and land. So the Undying Lands, I don't know what they were talking about. You can see them from the shore, the Great Western Sea in all its glory. Yeah, I think there's just a little bit too much from the attackers. They're going to move in now. Of course, they're Blackguards, and I may have to eat my own words here because the Mithrandir's retinue could be this thing which cements their victory. I still think they'd probably win even without the Mithrandir's retinue, but they could push through the lines here, make a nuisance of themselves, and finally put this battle beyond the defenders. And here we can see Minotaur Roman Gatekeepers crumble. So this attack from the north, there's nothing to answer it anymore. And now surely the attackers will crash down upon what remains of the defenders and secure the Grey Havens for the Umbar alliance today. Or the Aradanayan, if that's what you want to call them. I did mention in the intro the script in Divide and Conquer where the Black Numenorians tend to try and attack Mithlond. It never seems to go too well for them. They can bog down the High Elves for quite a long time, but I've never seen a game where the Black Numenorians take Mithlond, destroy the High Elves, and then become a menace in the west. It's probably a good thing, because the CPU has enough going for it from an evil perspective when you consider how dominant Mordor and Isengard usually are. Understandably so, perhaps. Hearthguard of Amon Sul still fighting well. Bit of a clumsy bump into the backfield here from the Mithrandir's retinue, but even so, this is a sign that the writing is on the wall. Having a look here. Yeah, it's going to be within 10%. By battle's end, 7 or 8% probably will be the differential. I guess with that, let's go up to ×2 speed.
Our men have taken control of the castle.
This, after all, is the only fight left going on. Mithrandir's retinue sitting in the town centre.
Our enemy has lost his stomach to fight. We must push our advantage.
That would undoubtedly be one of the Cardolan armies. The Hearthguard of Max still fighting, and of course Coffey's Numenorian elites still doing their thing as well, showcasing their tanky nature. Yeah, well worth showing this one off, and it has been quite a while since I last showcased the Grey Haven. In fact, I think it was at the very start of the year, so it is about time. Or was it? Yeah, I'm sure it was. Either way, it is probably the most popular of WK's creations to play on. Dol Amroth was just a little bit too vast. Even when you had 8 players, it felt like you were lost within it, as impressive as it was.
Fate has been kind to us and delivered us victory.
Interested to see his interpretation of Dale. So there we have it. As far as the defenders go, you'd expect Numenor to get a few more kills perhaps, and even though Ruvik was given a bit of a harsh time in the early game, I would be tempted to give him the MVP because of how he was able to turn his fight against Numenor around, which I think is fitting given the end of the last Edoras replay that we showed, where again it wasn't really what he had in mind, I'm sure, but his decision to pull out his unit from that fight ultimately ended up costing his team what should have been a waltz to the finish. But on this occasion, I feel like the work he did in the early game really set the standard for the attacking team, and ultimately, like I kind of thought, when the defenders started to pull back to the TC, the losses they took in that phase of the battle, it was always going to be difficult for them to recover from, and they weren't really able to do it, especially with several examples throughout the battle that we saw of them using their ammunition not entirely wisely. But yeah, it is what it is. Let's have a little look and see what did the damage for actually 3 Umbar armies, so we get to see quite a few. Ruvik's Harbingers of Castamere doing really well. We actually don't see the Harbingers of Castamere all that often do this well. I'm not sure why entirely. We see Heavy Swordsmen do pretty well, but it's just one of those weird things. But on this occasion they do. Another unit breaking 100 kills is of course the Rangers, the Castamere's Rangers doing it quite nicely, and for the attackers to break 100 kills on a unit is very impressive, and the Corsair Blackguard's also doing that, so the Javelins being used to good effect as well, the Defenders being caught flat-footed on more than one occasion there. Alcarondas Legion, this is for Mr. Susan's army, so this, I think, to be fair to Mr. Susan, I think I missed most of the good work that he did, because he attacked very quickly, very suddenly, smashed through the initial defences that he had, that the defenders had marshalled at the gate that he was attacking through, dealt with that very quickly. It did cost him because he didn't have a ton of units left for the attack on the north in the late game, but he had enough that it was still, there, and he was still decisive. And then Beastie 70, the player sent me the replay. Ultimately, none of his units broke 100 kills. It was very uniform throughout. The most kills he got was on Balakith Axguard 94. Actually, no, 99. Ooh, one shy of 100 kills there on some Corsair Fencers, which of course got a throwing projectile as well as being pretty good in melee. The Umbar equivalent of the Thieves of Tharbad, which we saw several times doing their thing in this battle, but the Corsair Fencers we only saw in pure melee with their rapiers. Excuse me. So yeah, big thank you to Beastie70 for sending me this battle replay. So unlike the Moria replay that he sent me last time, which of course had that rather worrying total crash bug on it, I'm still not entirely sure why that was, but it was something which was certainly worrisome, but it does appear to be a thing of the past. It was not something that affected all replays, and indeed it's not something that even affects all replays from Beastie. So do feel free to send me more in the future if you wish, because as it turns out, nothing really is wrong with it. I still don't understand what was wrong with that one. It was a really strange and bizarre thing indeed. It must have just been a fairly demanding battle, as battles on Moria can tend to be. But yeah, big thank you to him. Big thank you to all of the players that are a part of this battle replay, of course. This is the first battle that I'm completely recording following the channel update announcement that I was going to be reducing the amount of content. To be fair, this again, as soon as I post that video up to the point where I'm said, well, it's just not going to be possible, there is a small chance, I will say, so don't take this as gospel, there is a small chance that I will be able to continue after a week or perhaps 2 week gap where I only do one video, of putting it back up to 2 videos a week. So it could be a very temporary thing, more temporary than I thought it was going to be, where I thought it was going to be like a month and a half to 2 months. The reason for that is I think the next trip away that I'm having is not actually 3 weeks or even 2 weeks, but I think it's actually only going to be 5 days, which gives me a little bit more breathing space to get back onto some bigger recording sessions and give myself a little bit more time to recover from using up all of my backlog, as it were. But we'll have to wait and see. For the time being, we'll have to play it by ear. It could be that if that is the case, I'll do a live stream channel update, because it will give me a little bit more time to do a Q&A sort of thing as well, where people can ask me a few questions about where I'm going to be going with things. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.